Hello and welcome back to the Live Your Life series. My name is Bree Milas, and this series is brought to you by myself as well as the Who I Am Foundation. I'm really excited to continue to build off of what we've already talked about so far. This week really builds off of last week's topic, which was self-confidence. How do you increase your confidence? How do you know what you're good at? And how do you know what skills, abilities, and talents you bring to the table to share with others to make an impact on them positively in their lives and in this world around us? This week, we're talking about building positive relationships. And I think it's so valuable to know what you bring to the table in order to build positive, effective, and healthy relationships with those around us. In terms of relationships, that doesn't necessarily just mean romantic relationships, but it can mean romantic relationships, but also relationships that we have with our family members, relationships that we have with coworkers, different people who we may encounter in our day-to-day lives. So I'm really excited to kind of hone in on what does having a positive relationship look like? What does that mean? And more so, how do you actually establish a positive relationship? First off, I think it's very valuable to be clear about the types of relationships that we want to have in our lives, right? Who doesn't want to have positive relationships? We want to surround ourselves with people who we know are going to make a significant and positive impact in our daily lives. I know from such an early age, something that my mom would always tell me is you're a reflection of the people who you surround yourself with. Therefore, you want to make sure that that circle of individuals around you really speaks to who you are as a person. And more so, you want to make sure that those individuals in your circle really emulate great qualities, skills, and abilities that really inspire you to be a better person, keep you motivated, and keep you learning and growing as an individual. With that being said, you also want to know, again, kind of what you can contribute to those relationships. Yes, you want to have great people in your circle so you can kind of gain and learn and grow from the skills and abilities and things that they bring to the table, but you also want to give back. So it's going to be a mutual, reciprocal type of relationship. So again, last week we talked about self-confidence, knowing what you're good at, knowing your strengths. What are the strengths that you have and how can you bring those into these relationships that you have with other individuals that you encounter in your day-to-day life? Going off of that, it's also very valuable to appreciate and acknowledge the values that those around you may bring as well. I'm pretty sure we can all think of a few friends or family members that we may have that we couldn't be more thankful that they are a part of our lives because they do certain things so well, or they're always making a positive impact. They're always smiling. They're always putting others' needs before themselves. And I think it's just as valuable to thank them for that and as it is to learn from those skills that they have just by simply being around them in their day-to-day life. The next thing that's very important when building positive relationships is going to be communication. Communication is key, and I feel in relationships, just as much as communication is valuable, so is self-awareness. And I feel like those two really go hand in hand. Again, last week, talking about self-confidence, knowing what you're good at, knowing what your strengths are. You're self-aware, right? You have a pretty good sense of where you succeed. You have a pretty good sense of some areas that you need to improve upon. But with that being said, when you're self-aware, you can be really sure what it is that you bring to a relationship with individuals. You can be sure how to communicate with individuals that you're trying to establish relationships with, or how you communicate with individuals who you've had long-lasting relationships with in the past. So with that being said, how do you know how to effectively communicate in order to establish these positive relationships in your life? I think first things first is having a good sense of who you are, knowing what's important to you, what you value. Like I said, what are those skills and strengths that you have, and what may you be lacking in your life, and how can you increase your support circle to start to implement some of those things that you may be missing. Like I said, we are often a reflection of those who we surround ourselves with. So if you feel like there's an area in your life you want to improve upon, think about someone who's doing something very well and ask them like, hey, I'm very curious, How have you been able to maintain a healthy eating lifestyle? This is something I've been struggling with for a long time. It seems like you do it really well. I would love to get some advice and feedback on that. And having that person there to give you that advice, give you that feedback, can also help you stay motivated. It can help you hone in on that goal if that's something you want to do. And then obviously you're going to start to kind of learn and get some takeaways on what they do well in order to be able to maintain that healthy lifestyle. Maybe it's an individual who you know is excellent at communicating. I myself do not like to have difficult conversations. Anything that has to do with conflict, I try to stay away from. Years of practice in the making, I've gotten much better at that. Having serious conversations with people, having necessary conversations with people when the time comes, and just having to sit down and have that direct, clear communication in order to move forward in that relationship is very valuable. And it's something that, like I said, I've been working on and learning to do and get better at over time. But with that, a lot of those enhancing of the skills have come from kind of observing other people who are just great at communicating, people who are excellent at delivering maybe some tough news, or just being upfront and honest and possibly just sharing some things that maybe we don't always want to hear, but learning how to effectively communicate that in a way in which it's not going to negatively impact the relationship with other individuals around us. And at the end of the day, ultimately, you just want them to know where you're coming from because you care about them and you care about the relationship you have with them, and that's not something you want to miss out on. So how do you effectively communicate with these individuals is going to be a very key aspect of having strong relationships. I think something else that's very valuable that comes to mind is just thinking about the type of people you attract in your life. Typically, whatever we put out there is what we're going to get back, right? So if we're going to be putting out negative energy, negative thoughts, we'll probably find ourselves being surrounded by people who also kind of bring negative energy, negative thoughts, maybe not the most uplifting personal mindset, right? And that can be difficult. I'm sure we can all think of situations or times or maybe a specific person who doesn't always have the most positive outlook on life. And sometimes after hanging around that person, you can't almost but help to also not start to feel those negative feelings and think like, yeah, this life it sucks and everything's tough and nothing's going well right now and I'm so down, and if it's not one thing, it's another. Whereas we can probably also think about someone who's super positive, always uplifting, constantly smiling, and sees that glass more on the half full side opposed to the half empty side. I don't know about you, but those are the people that I like to surround myself with. That's the type of energy that keeps me moving, keeps me motivated, keeps me striving towards my goals and fulfilling, whatever it is that I have in front of me that I want to accomplish. Because with that positive energy, all that motivation just continues to generate. And I love to see and be surrounded by people who have a good heart, who have a clear mind, and have a good sense of direction and where they're looking to go. I also feel with people who have that positive outlook on life, it is easier to communicate with them, right? Like I said, having these relationships with individuals really comes down to having a strong form of communication. So when we talk about communication, when it comes to having difficult conversations with individuals that we care about, that we want to continue to be in our circle, that we want to have available for support, when certain things come up that we may not necessarily know how to address, or maybe we feel uncomfortable with asking them a question or bringing up something that may be bothering us, a really good approach to take is seeking for understanding. So if you're someone like me who tries to stray away from that conflict because you don't want to hurt someone's feelings, or you're afraid you're going to say the wrong thing, or maybe they're going to misinterpret what it is you have to say, it's very valuable to take a step back and kind of assess the situation and really think, okay, what is it that I want this person to know? How can I effectively communicate this to them? And what are some actual examples of what it is that I want to bring up and address with them to make sure I can clearly get my point across? From there, I always like to write things down. That helps me. That may not be the case for everyone, but sometimes I find it very helpful. Sometimes I write down these talking points, and when I get to have the conversation with the individual, I don't even use them. It's more so it helps me prepare to have a difficult conversation. By the time I'm having the conversation, I can just remember and refer back mentally to what it is that I wanted to highlight and mention in that conversation. From there, it's just a matter of making sure that you are allotting that person just the fair amount of time that you are giving yourself to express your concerns, let them express their concerns. But more importantly, after they've shared what it is that they have to share, make sure that you're seeking for understanding in ways in which you're asking follow-up questions if there's something you don't necessarily agree with, or maybe don't necessarily understand where they're coming from. Asking them, hey, I think I'm a little bit confused on your perspective on this. Can you explain that a little bit more? Because I really do want to understand. And then from there, it's just a matter of kind of going back and forth, making sure that you're really taking the time to listen to what that person is saying and finding that common ground. And I promise you, more times than not, these conversations may seem scary, but the more you do it, the better you get at it, and the better effective communicator you will become. And like I said, having the effective communication skills is a key aspect of building strong relationships with those around us. It's very important to be able to not only advocate for ourselves, but also have a good sense of, who we are as a person, what we value, what is non-negotiable, and how we can stand up for that. I think a matter of speaking up on what it is that we don't necessarily agree with really shows a sense of self-respect, right? And we've talked a lot about that. We've talked about confidence. We've talked about self-care. And if you truly value yourself and who you are as an individual, I strongly encourage you to speak up when you don't feel like things are right. And perhaps I'm perceiving this or painting this picture where communication in relationships always comes up when a conflict arises, right? But let's take another look at it and think about it from more of a positive aspect. As I was mentioning earlier, sometimes we want to have people in our circle who can just shine their light on us, to sprinkle some of that motivation, to keep us going, to fuel that momentum that we've been having by having individuals in our life who we know succeed and excel in certain areas that we may not. So having those conversations with them and asking them, how do you do this? How do you keep going? How do you move forward in your goals, and how do you accomplish those goals? That can be a very positive conversation to have with that individual. You're still effectively communicating because you're asking key questions that are going to give you hopefully examples and tips on how you can be successful in that area, or at least get some takeaways in ways in which that individual has been successful. And you can learn ways to start to slowly implement and hopefully incorporate that into your own life. Ultimately, I feel having strong relationships really fuels having that strong foundation that we've talked about. Now, kind of doing a quick recap of everything and how it's starting to come full circle, thinking back to assessing those areas in your life that you wanted to do better on, knowing what you're good at, taking time to care for yourself, having your vision, having your goals. Now we're getting to the point where we have a good sense of who we are. We know what we want to work on. We know what we're good at. We know what we bring to the table. We value ourselves. We have clear and distinct goals. How do we make sure that we have a strong foundation in place and a strong support circle surrounding us in order to continue to successfully accomplish these goals? As we know, we've probably all heard the saying, when the going gets tough, just keep on going. I think that is very feasible if you have a strong foundation as well as a strong support system around you. There are days in which I have no energy no motivation to do anything. And then someone will send me a quick note and say, hey, thank you so much for your help on this, or I really appreciated you, sharing this insight with me, and thank you for all that you do. And my day can completely change in a matter of minutes. And just by, hearing that positive note, having a compliment, things like that can really just inspire me to continue to do what it is that I have on my plate, because I know that it's making a difference to someone somehow. And it doesn't even have to be a thank you. It could literally be a friend or a colleague reaching out for advice and asking, like, hey, how do you go about tackling these types of projects? Hey, how do you go about having a conversation with someone? And me feeling as if, people feel comfortable enough to confide in me. And hey, maybe this is one of my strengths, because this is something that people often ask me about. So I'm more than happy to share that with them, because just as much as I want to grow, I want those around me to grow as well. So I'm happy to inspire them, as well as happy to learn and be inspired by the individuals who I surround myself with in my day-to-day life. So hopefully that was helpful, talking about getting a better sense of what positive relationships look like. Who do you have in your support group? Who do you want to have in your circle? How do you navigate difficult conversations, but also how do you navigate more productive and fruitful conversations with those you want to learn from as well as grow with? That's all I have for today. Next time, we're going to be talking about tackling your obstacles. So what are those roadblocks in the way of you accomplishing your vision and goals? Thank you so much again. Super excited to share these thoughts with you. Again, just some quick weekly motivation. Really happy you're here. I strongly encourage you to check out the Who I Am Foundation if you haven't already. So many amazing opportunities to volunteer and get involved. And I hope you have such a great week and can't wait to see you again.